In this video essay, there will be an examination of the two paintings regarding the story of Judith from the Book of Judith, where a young Jewish widow seduces an Assyrian general and beheads him, thereby saving the city. The two paintings used are Artemisia Gentileschi's and Caravaggio's. The two paintings have the same story, but completely different interpretations. The first is a powerful reimagining, one that is true to the original tale of valor, and the second is a typical patriarchal look at the tale. The objective of this essay is to compare and contrast the two works. There's an analysis of the formal elements and a closer look at the whys and hows of how these works came to be, and lastly an overall consensus on the works and how their versions stand side by side. Artemisia Gentileschi's work, completed between the years 1612 to 1613, oil on canvas. In contrast to anybody else's, Artemisia Gentileschi's version is an incredibly different work from Caravaggio's or anyone else's, even with the fact that she was heavily inspired by Caravaggio himself, with her use of tenebrism and darker subject matter. This is a dark and bloody narrative. Quote, "The blood that spouts and gushes from his neck, while the unsheathed blade cuts it, and the dazzling bed linens reddened with drops of blood, simultaneously awaken in it the soul," page 171 Locker. The blood here isn't contained, it bursts forth, is wild, and stains the bed itself. To look at this work, we look at the two different interpretations of it. Art historian Murray Gerard suggests that Judith slaying Holofernes represents Judith as a socially liberated woman who punishes masculine deeds, in this case wars. And it is believed that Judith was a cathartic representation of Artemisia herself. The other interpretation is that, from art historian Griselda Pollock, that, quote, "The painting should be read less in terms of its overt references to Artemisia's life experience than an encoding of the artist's sublimated responses to events in her life and the historical context in which she worked. The work is a reflection of all that she is, but mostly it is the way that she was dissatisfied with women's roles in her time. Quote, "It is important to remember that forms of activism in the 17th century were very different from modern-day feminism." And to conclude, this is an extremely different work with its very pro-feminist views, even before there was formally feminism at the time. Caravaggio's work, completed between the years 1598 to 1599 to possibly 1602, oil on canvas, is a much more idealized version. It tells the same story, but in a patriarchal tone. For example, Judith in his version is dainty and an impassive bystander in this heroic tale. It is, quote, "painted a startlingly sadoerotic Judith and Holofernes with Philidie in the leading role," page 181, Graham Dixon. Philidie was one of his favorite courtesans. Philidie most likely inspired this work with her own stories, such as a fight that she had with a fellow courtesan. But despite this fight that made Caravaggio cast her, page 391.1, D.H. Lawrence, he depicts Judith with a, quote, "light blouse that through which her erect nipples are revealed, as if the concentration on her face references pain associated not only with physical but sexual exertion." The composition itself leads to this with a very flat work, in line with Caravaggio's naturalism, page 723 Kleiner, and injected naturalism into the representation of sacred objects, reducing them to human dramas played out in the harsh and dingy settings of his time. But this can be interpreted as a lighter feminine approach, as many of his other works stay more true to his tenebrism. And while he portrays a much more masculine energy to his other works that he associates with heroism, the same portrayal is not extended to Judith. Overall, this work is true to the patriarchal lens to which women and their stories are viewed through by men. In order to summarize, these two works are two completely different interpretations of the same narrative. Caravaggio's is a sadoerotic interpretation that follows a patriarchal view, and Artemisia Gentileschi's is a violent and bloody affair that challenges all other works that come before theirs. The works are informed by the artist's gender identity, historical context of their times, the way they viewed women, and how they fit into narratives. To conclude, while these works are the same narrative, have similar formal elements and techniques, they are highly different works.